Awesome. So I'm joined today by three amazing people in the product, and we're going to ask them all to introduce themselves. So Ryan, how about I start with you?
Hey everybody, glad to be here. My name is Ryan McGrew. I'm a VP of Product at Zendesk, our customer service solution. I work on our AI agents and self-service products based in Copenhagen, Denmark. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome, Ryan. And yeah, if any of you are users of Zendesk, please shout in the chat. Next, we have Marley from MPB.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marley. I'm the Senior User Experience Researcher at MPB. I sit across all Scrum teams, so I do everything strategic and within the squads.
Fantastic. And yeah, if you haven't come across MPB, it's a fantastic company where you can buy all your photo equipment. And Zach.
Hey, great to see everybody. I'm Zach Hobbs, SVP of Product at Atmosphere TV. We create amazing TV content for bars, restaurants, and gyms, and monetize it with kind of some deep ad tech. And excited to chat today.
Fantastic. So as you can see, we have leaders from very different types of products, some selling to businesses, some selling to consumers, some selling to very small businesses. So we'll cover a lot of topics, and you'll see that some of the same problems appear across all of these. I want to start with asking all of you, how do you prioritize customer needs when setting annual plans and creating roadmaps? Zach, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So we generally try to have kind of two tracks of user insight. And, the first one is just a continuous user listening, user interactions. And we do a lot of work to kind of aggregate the feedback, but also create more opportunities for PMs to have conversations. So I want all my PMs to have a really fundamental baseline of the challenges that, our 60,000 businesses that use us face day to day. And so that's that kind of continuous. In our case, we have physical locations. So one Friday a month, we have product teams who go visit locations and do check-ins and understand how the product's working. So from that baseline of customer understanding, that's when you can really create hypothesis around pay points that you want to go prioritize into into future versions of the product. And then so once you have those hypotheses, then we do a more formalized UX research around that hypothesis and validate it. Then once we validate it, we then bring it into the roadmap for the next, we do quarterly planning.
Awesome. Marley, is that similar to how MPB does this? Like same question, how do you prioritize customer needs when setting annual plans and creating roadmaps?
Yeah, it is similar. I think maybe one thing that MPB does really well is we've got lots of different channels for feedback, and we've made a big effort to aggregate all of those together. So we're talking NPS feedback from surveys, calls into customer experience and seller experience teams, internal pain points, Trustpilot, forum, pretty much anything we can gather together. And then we'll then go down the list by count. So how often is this problem happening? And then how big of an impact is it happening? Or how big of an impact is it having on our customers? And we can then feed that into product managers on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, depending on how big the problem is for both the consumer and for the business. And I think it's most effective for us to prioritize customer needs by having kind of that balance of a quarterly planning session that's officially with the UX research team, and then those informal chats throughout the year. And to Zach's point, just creating those opportunities for product managers to talk with customers so they can hear it right from the horse's mouth.
Fantastic. Music to my ears. And Ryan, yeah, at Zendesk, I guess you guys sit on a lot of customer voice. So how does this process work? How do you prioritize customer needs when setting annual plans and creating roadmaps?
Yeah, I feel like in broad strokes, it's really similar, right? So we have sort of annual and quarterly planning processes. We're taking in sort of both bottoms up and top down planning. So bottoms up, this is product managers engaging with customers all the time on a bunch of different channels, be that, live over Zoom or on site, to, engaging in our community forum or in, customer support tickets, right? Top down, we're looking a little bit more strategically. Where do we see opportunity in the market? Where are we potentially losing deals, or like looking at large customer churn, and where do we need to bring those things, kind of in line or bring in new capabilities. So it's really kind of trying to balance those things together. We need to do that with things like be able to measure impact to our revenue. So will a particular feature affect, a certain customer segment or a certain group of customers that has an outsized impact? So yeah, a bunch of different inputs to it, but I think it sounds pretty similar.
Awesome. And Ryan, since you started talking about balance, maybe I'll ask you the next question. What strategies do you use to ensure the team strikes a balance between innovation and addressing recurring customer pain points? I know that you guys are working a lot on AI functionality in particular now. Mm-hmm. How do you think about that balance?
Yeah, I mean, ideally they should align. So I think Zendesk is in sort of an interesting position, right? We've been a company for I think just over 17 years. Have been gone public, now gone private again. We have 100,000 customers across a bunch of different segments and verticals. So laggards to early adopters. I think generally you're always going to have a certain amount of I don't want to say keep the lights on, but you're dealing with something is just kind of annoying, enhancing or rebuilding a UI that's suboptimal because it was built 10 years ago, things of that nature. But then I think at the end of the day, what a lot of our customers want to do or are dealing with is they want to provide better customer support with fewer resources than they used to have or be more cost efficient. And that's really where AI comes in, especially in customer service, is starting to automate more, but doing it in a way that's satisfying. And so that's where things like AI agents come in. So it's not necessarily dealing with, a legacy pain point, but it's allowing customers new capability to solve the same problems in a more satisfying way.
Fantastic. And Marley, same question. How does MPB balance innovation versus solving recurring pain points?
Yeah, I think similar to what Ryan said, you hope the two are the same thing, and often they are. I think from a UX research perspective, it's helpful to think about two main categories of pain points. So you've got sort of discrete pain points, which are something like our add to basket button is too hidden, versus an evergreen pain point, which is something that happens across time. It's a bit more abstract. It's more likely to persist. For MPB, a big one for us is new users don't know if they can trust our company. That's something that we will often and likely always have to address. And there's a lot more room for innovation within those evergreen problem spaces, which will address customer pain points as we kind of go along. So one of the problems we have at MPB is that customers find it difficult to compare between products. We have some models that have over 300 products, and that can be a bit overwhelming for customers. So we recently released a comparison tool, which was a bit more on the innovation side, and then coupled that with work on our filters and making sure that those are working for customers so that we're viewing it under this larger umbrella of that evergreen problem space. And I think the easiest way to do that is an impact versus effort matrix, which I'm sure a lot of people on the call are familiar with, to decide where your efforts are going to make the biggest impact in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely have seen those matrices before. I think it's the impact part that's always hard to actually estimate correctly. Zach, about at Atmosphere, how do you strike that balance between innovation and solving the customer pain points?
Yeah, I think as a product leader, you can also think about how to set up your organization to tackle both. So some things we've done is create teams that are focused around an innovative bet that aren't going to be kind of slowed down or worry about having to deal with kind of the day-to-day of keeping everything working really well. That I think works really well for kind of when you're expanding the footprint of your product offering, right? If you're expanding into new areas, you can set up your org in that way. I also think that there's getting the cultural aspect of how you handle bug reports and the prioritization process for that, I think are critically important. I think getting everyone in the team bought into it's exciting to solve customer problems, right? And it's exciting for customers to give you feedback that they love your product. And I think creating that culture in the organization is really important, where you find teams just kind of fix things because that's just the culture of the business. So I think, organization and culture are big. Obviously, Ryan and Marley touched on, the day-to-day of, trying to find that overlap between where you're headed from a strategic perspective and where the problems are. That's going to be kind of your day-to-day tool.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I want to change focus a little bit and talk maybe more about real stories, real examples, because for me, they always make things a lot more illustrative. So maybe each of you can share an example where user feedback led to an improvement in some specific business metric. And Zach, I'll start with you. We'll go in a snake fashion. I think you shared a story with me about conversions and product adoption. It was quite unintuitive.
Yeah, I think for the beginning of this business, there was always this idea that product engagement is the goal, right? You want people using the product more often. We'd look at typical metrics like login frequency or session length and things like that. And when we really dug in, talked to customers and ask them, why do you want Atmosphere TV? Why do you like it? What is it about Atmosphere TV that helps you as a business owner, especially a small business owner, right? The response started consistently being, we love it because it's easy and we don't ever have to mess with it. And so we started really leaning into that in how we design our products, how we scope out the products. So we really lean into like, how do we simplify everything? You can have really advanced marketing tools for how businesses can show their ads on the screen, or you can simplify it and know that these aren't professional marketers. They want the marketing to be very easy to execute on. And then we readjusted all of our KPIs and really looked at like, what is our NPS, what is our churn and retention, and focusing less on how often do they log into the dashboard. Because maybe logging into the dashboard is, there's a number of reasons you might log in, some of them good, some of them bad. But ultimately, we just want our customers to be happy and we want them to stay on the service. So,
yeah, it's a very interesting example because usually what you measure gets improved, but sometimes what you measure is actually not the right thing. Dashboard logins is definitely the same for us as well at Chattermill. Ryan, what's your favorite story on improving using customer feedback to drive some important metric for the business?
Yeah, great question. I think for us, especially as we made the move into AI with AI agents and our agent copilot capabilities, we've had to work with customers on trust, right? So as we put more and more functionality on large language models and generative AI, customers want to understand a lot of different things about how data is used, how an LLM produces a response or an answer. And so we found we had to focus a lot on trust up front. And there was a couple interesting ways to do that. One, we really had to beef up our ability to go talk about both in our product and as well as part of our sales cycle of how data is used, the models that we have, things like that. But then it was really important to give customers early preview access to actually be able to see how things are going to work in a near real world context, right? So you could start interacting with a bot in a preview type of capability. You could see the behavior. We had to do things like making sure the bot would cite its sources. It had traceability in its decision making, conversation logs. So it wasn't just about taking a customer conversation and throwing it to an LLM and seeing how it reacted. It was everything that sort of had to hang around that infrastructure so that customers could gain trust with the system and how it behaves. And so we spent a lot of time there, and that actually helped us drive in-product activation of this capability for our customers.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely one of my most popular topics lately is talking with customers about AI agents and whether they can be trusted. Marley, what about you? I think you have a very interesting story about customer lifetime value.
Yeah, so at MPB, where I work, we buy and sell photography and videography equipment. So we need people to sell to us so that we can then buy it. It's like an eBay, but we're the only buyer in town. And we use Chattermill to compile a lot of our feedback. And we found that far and away, the most negative mentions in our feedback was about not knowing what accessories to send in with your kit. So for example, if you were selling a camera, did you need to send a lens cap? Did you need to sell the neck strap as well? Sellers just weren't clear what they needed to send in. So we gathered that information from Chattermill and then made the business case, which is basically the what, the why, and the how big. So with Chattermill, we were able to identify the what. We did some customer interviews to understand the why. And then we used internal data to understand how big the problem was and how many customers it was affecting. We were then able to prototype a few different solutions and put them in front of users. And we've currently now got a static list of accessories that customers need to send in with their kit. And we're moving towards a dynamic model that will affect the pricing. And I think ultimately this is a success story because it's not only resulted in happier sellers that have a higher NPS score, but it's also increased our quote, which I think goes back to our earlier point of sometimes those customer pain points and business needs are actually really, really entwined.
Fantastic. And I especially love that you use Chattermill to get this done, but the result is incredible. We have a couple more questions, but I just wanted to mention that we will have a few minutes for Q&A. So if you do have a question for this panel, please drop a question on chat and our team will pick it up. Well, before that, we'll do just one other question for everyone on the panel. So how do you foster alignment and collaboration between product design, engineering, and customer experience teams to ensure that the feedback is properly integrated and acted upon? Marley, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. So from an organizational perspective, I'm on a product and customer team. So organizationally, we're all quite aligned. We've got our seller experience, customer experience, product and product design, all sort of on the same level. And this just means a lot of regular touch points across the teams, which makes collaboration pretty easy. We've also got a Voice of the Customer forum. I put out a monthly report, and then we have a quarterly meeting with all of those teams to understand what are the biggest drivers of negative feedback and what are the biggest opportunities for us, especially as they impact our operations space, which has historically been a point where we haven't collaborated well that we're now trying to do better at. I'll also, from a research perspective, invite people into interviews. So engineers, marketing people, anyone in operations, anyone's welcome to join. And I think when you hear problems from the customer, they're more likely to sit, and you'll be able to take that into the work that you do more than just hearing it from me.
Awesome. Ryan, same question.
So I think there's a few things. One, I think as we think about like internal alignment within the product development team, we have a single shared roadmap between product, engineering, and design, right? It's not like there's a design roadmap or an engineering roadmap that sits outside. This is a single thing that we build and prioritize together. So that's how we try to stay in line, aligned internally. I think we also, measure a few key kind of like customer experience metrics. And so one of them is we set up SLAs on all of our customer service tickets that get escalated to, product teams. So making sure that we can respond to customer issues quickly and solve things out so that they, can move on if they're facing issues or have questions about the product. We also have similar internal tooling around customer product feedback. So we aggregate all customer product feedback from our customer success and sales teams into a single forum. Again, we have similar SLAs where we're, making sure we can respond to them, inform them, is this on our roadmap? On what time horizon is it on our roadmap, or is it not on our roadmap, right? It's a divergent request and we're not going to put it in the backlog. And then, we engage directly in a few sort of public forums like our community forum, as well as like internal forums like Slack, where we, try to help out our customer experience teams. So those are a few areas that we engage in.
Wow. It's amazing. It's amazing. And Zach, over to you.
Yeah, we do quite a few things, but I think it all starts with everyone having an alignment around like the vision, why this matters, what we're trying to do. And then from that foundation, you can then build on top of that with these user feedback, with all the user feedback you can get. And some things I love doing, I love sharing anecdotal examples where you have just a video of a user interview of someone like spilling their heart out about a problem and how our vision of the future is a solution for that problem, right? I love, just customer testimonials, clips from CS calls, And yeah, just any data source you can find, App Store reviews. So those are all just like the ad hoc stuff. I drop them in Slack. We all emoji react and celebrate, and it's a big rah rah, right? And then we also do a monthly kind of voice of the customer type of report with an aggregation showing trends around cancellation reasons, or what the call types are for customer service calls and everything. But yeah, I mean, I think alignment to me is like vision plus getting people bought in, right? So you have this vision you put out there, and then you use that customer feedback to help get the organization bought into that. This vision is absolutely worth our time and investment.
Awesome. All right, fantastic. So we have some great questions coming in already. I'm gonna be very picky because we don't have a lot of time, so we might not answer every single question. Maybe I'll start with this controversial one. What do you do when internal stakeholders push back on prioritizing user feedback-driven changes? I think, Zach, you partly answered that question already with the anecdotes, with the videos, which I really liked. Like that I do find in my practice is very tough to say no when you hear a customer talking about a pain point. But yeah, any other tips from anyone?
One thing I'll say is make sure you understand the why. Like, why are they pushing back? Is there a misalignment around the long-term versus short-term, or, is there an external business market justification that you're not aware of? So don't just assume they're dumb would be my first, feedback. Right. But yeah, I'll defer to Marley and Ryan for other tips on that.
Marley.
No, I think exactly what Zach was going to say. And I think if I could just add one more thing, it's important to understand what they're pushing back on. Is it the solution? Is it the problem? Is it the timeline? It's important to break that down to understand where you might have a bit of wiggle room. And I think sometimes there is an instinct to prioritize business needs over customer needs. And that's something that in the UX research space is often talked about. And I find the most efficient way to articulate the value of doing customer facing work is to prove it with past examples. So if people maybe haven't bought into the idea that doing customer facing work is good for the business, show them all the times where you've proved them wrong.
Awesome. Ryan, anything to add, or you're in agreement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it. I think generally you need to, sort of make that connection between how making that change or that solution ties back into your strategic goals, right? So if you're trying to build your top line and you can make a particular thing easier or faster for a customer, like that can directly impact that. But I think Zach and Marley were very right. Like, dig in deeper, really understand what the pushback's about.
Okay, and we have an interesting question that came up about like how to make real-time user feedback more actionable. This person is saying that generic pop-up surveys tend to be not very actionable, which I would challenge potentially. But I will actually divert the question to you on the panel. So yeah, how do you make user feedback more actionable generally? Is it something about collecting it or kind of analyzing it, or some of the things we already discussed? I know, Marley, maybe we'll start with you this time.
I have a lot of thoughts. This is a very good question. I think for me, one of the biggest lessons that I learned as a UX researcher was distinguishing between data, findings, and insight. So data is just that raw piece of feedback. Findings is more like you maybe find a pattern, and then insight is what can you do with that pattern. And I think often making user feedback actionable requires you to have an insight. So it requires a bit of a pattern. It requires you to know the why, as Zach was saying. And I find often stakeholders are swayed by numbers. So if you can quantify the scale of the problem, either how many customers is this affecting or how much is it costing the business, you are more likely to get that piece of feedback actioned.
Awesome. Zach, any thoughts on this? How to make feedback more actionable?
Yeah, I think research design in general, it's I don't think you should stumble into how you do research. And if you were to put a survey together, I think you have to be pretty thoughtful about research design. And in fact, like while you're going through the design process on designing, whether it's a survey or user interviews or whatever, whatever methodology you're using, I think you should be asking yourself and the team, like almost like a pre-mortem, like, can I imagine myself sitting in a meeting when we read out the results and then us just saying, this doesn't matter? You know what I mean? Like, so like you have to like design it around like, what are you, like design it from actionability from the beginning. So that's, yeah, I would say that it's be very thoughtful about your research design.
Fantastic. Ryan, anything to add?
No, I think Zach and Marley actually articulated it really well. I really like Marley's framework. So yeah.
Marley, we should share it at some point. Awesome. I just saw a really interesting question come in from Emma. It's do you map customer and user journeys to help you surface insights, sentiments, and test hypotheses? So yeah, how does journey mapping work with analyzing customer feedback? I don't, Ryan, maybe we'll start with you this time around.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think you'll see more of this probably in the B2C software space than maybe in the B2B space, like especially in enterprise software where people are willing to kind of like jump through a few hoops to configure the things. That being said, like, we put a lot of time and effort into our agent workspace capability. This is where agents live 8 to 10 hours a day, depending on their job, right? And so it's really important to understand the parts of that job and how they move from one action to the next, where they need like really fast ergonomics, right? Things like keyboard shortcuts, et cetera, et cetera. So I think like that's a really important thing for us to understand when we talk about like user journeys, at least in our product. I think a lot of that stuff, like I wish we did a little bit more sort of data-driven A/B testing, but that's a little bit difficult inside of the B2B space versus like, historically B2C retail is very like, Amazon historically is just like, I don't know, change the color of the button, give it to 50% or give it to 10% of our customer base. If it tests better, then that's the new, that's the candidate that we take forward. So I think, we have to do a lot of that a little bit more manually and go through and get feeling and like an insight through, customer interviews typically.
Fantastic. And Zach, anything to add on the journey mapping and analyzing insights from customer feedback?
Yeah, I find that journey mapping is really helpful to know impact sizing opportunities, right? So if you look at your journey and if you improve this part of the funnel versus this part of the funnel, like what's my maximum ceiling on, like a reasonable lift, right? So I think it's kind of a big funnel analysis. We do journey mapping for the experience side. Luckily, and kind of per my first answer, we keep our journey very, very simple. But yeah, for me, it's more about like identifying where the biggest impact could be, layer on data on that funnel, and then you can identify where the impact can be.
Fantastic. Marley, I see you have a co-host as well. What's your take on customer journeys?
Yeah, my cat's so excited about journey mapping that she decided to jump on. So we have actually done a huge project recently. We did a whole service design blueprint, which is a massive map of a customer journey alongside internal journeys as well. And this can be really helpful to add on to what we know about customers, because there are a lot of things that we can do internally to make our customers' lives easier that doesn't change anything they see. So what processes are slowing down our returns team, or what internal software are we using that isn't giving our customer experience representatives the data they need? Those sorts of things can actually make a big difference on customers without them ever noticing the difference. And that mapping tool really helps.
Fantastic. Love it. So we unfortunately are out of time for this session. Thanks to our amazing panelists. Thanks, Zach, Marley, and Ryan for joining us. I love the stories you shared. For all of you who asked the question in the chat, but we haven't had time to answer, unfortunately, we will absolutely answer. We'll stay in the chat and come back to you. But thank you for your contribution to the panel. And we have a lot of amazing content for you today. So we're going to move on to the next session. Thank you.